going to draw from some earlier sessions and also your content. And what I found interesting, Majid, from your presentation, it started me thinking about just the complexity of what we're talking about, the analytic complexity of measurement and of producing the analysis. So my question to all of you might be a little esoteric, but what do you believe the education system is providing in terms of entrance to the market to be ready for this environment? And are your companies doing anything, are your organizations doing anything to work with the education environment to build the kinds of curriculum that's necessary? This is a combination of IT, geospatial, analytics, statistics. Is the community providing students out of the, ready for the workforce to deal with this?
Clearly, there are two levels. One is it providing users with the tools to be capable of producing this kind of information and developing systems that can do that. And clearly, that's if you are an engineer and you're getting kind of some of the requisite skills like data sciences and programming, etc., you can do that. From the end user side, I think the challenge for all of us is to make it really simple to understand. So if you can see a picture or you can read a sentence, you should be able to understand it. So from that standpoint, you almost don't need any education to be able to do it.
The government side, I agree, there's definitely two different communities. We struggle to find high-end developers, high-end analysts in geospatial, in cyber, and many times what we hear is people come out of professional programs not skilled. We have to train them to do the job they're hired to do. So that's still a challenge for us. And I think the general awareness of the public, there's a basic from elementary school, when we hear about the little kids really adapting to technology, well, there's still a line of education and awareness to be able to tap the potential that should be common in the science, technology, education of every kid that comes up through school in this country.
Thanks. Anyone else?
So two-part answers to that. The good news is that some of what I learned in engineering, which is statistics and operations research and algorithms, is something that I'm seeing much more commonplace in terms of use now. The bad news is it's happening at a time when I've forgotten almost all of it. But I think from a discipline perspective, these are the disciplines that have become very prominent today, and they are in extreme short supply in the industry, extreme short supply. And if you want to look at competent data scientists, experts, so I think there needs to be really a societal focus and educational systems focus in increasing that supply, because without that, you can talk about a lot of things, but if you want to have it as an all-pervasive activity, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, we have a number of intern projects where we recruit qualified students from the university for these internships, and then hopefully some of them later on, after having worked for a while on the job, into the company. But that said, I would also agree we don't have enough qualified people who understand computer science as well as the geoinformatic aspects of that. So the more realistic approach is you take a good computer scientist or mathematician or physicist and then basically train him on the job on what you need him for.
Good. We've had some questions come in, and this was also on my list. So I read an article not too long ago that was referred to me by our CTO within OGC, George Percival, who's watching the market, what's next in standards. And one of the interesting things he picked up on was an article that claimed that, about half of the location references out in social media are wrong. They're just wrong, and they're really wrong. So when we look at sources like social media, we look at the uncertainty or the inaccuracy of that data. How does that affect things like predefined geofences for the type of work you do and others? How do we deal with uncertainty of the data aggregation in this process?
I think a lot of the data that the social companies are using right now are what is the UPS uses for mail. So they are PO boxes, right? So if you think of this hotel's address, it's whatever the street address is way out there, not in this conference room. So what social companies are doing today is they basically draw big round circles around PO boxes. Those are 1 mile usually in radius, and then they'll say, okay, you were in this vicinity. That's why there's a lack of accuracy with the data set. But it is improving. You know, we're talking to a lot of these companies that are saying, hey, we need to exactly know if the person is inside the Walmart or in the parking lot or in the shopping mall. And they will eventually partner with one of these companies in over here or us to improve the data set. But it's an evolution, you know. Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat have all turned on location as a variable in messaging. So it's getting there.
We have a very strong challenge in the notion of fitness for use. It can be time precision, it can be spatial precision, it can be accuracy of attributes, and a combination of those policies I talked about. Standards help, but there's got to be in some way in the metadata a characterization of fitness for use, because what happens if you combine very high precision, high reliability, high accuracy with something that's not, is the average is not suitable for use. And particularly in the mashup world, if you think about some of the things we're dealing with, for some use cases it's just fine to have. We heard several presenters talk about generalized information, less precise, less accurate, it's okay for certain uses. But on our end, if it's for things like, should I shoot that guy or not? You better not be wrong. Am I going to have my house burn up or not? You better not be wrong. So the use cases really need to drive decisions about risk and fitness for use.
Yeah, I also reacted to some of the data on measurement, the investment that needs to be made based on location. If that's wrong, you know, we overinvest, we're no results. So I think the issue of accuracy and fitness for use and quality is still an issue. Is there a body tackling that as a standardization? I know OGC probably sure would like to tackle that, but is the industry trying to adopt, you know, we heard this morning about the hardware and how the hardware is extremely accurate. On the mobile side, is the industry trying to adopt a common policy on location referencing?
I don't think we are yet at a point where we have a common policy for that. And the ambiguity is, you know, how many Springfields are in the United States, and how do you know which one you look for? You are in Texas and you are searching for Paris. Do you mean Paris in Texas, or do you mean the capital of France, right? Maybe when you look at the map, or maybe if there's a hotel in combination with the query and the user location, the more signals you have, the more confidence you can get. It needs to be more than just the query that the user types in there. And, you know, the more people leave traces on the internet, the more machine learning algorithms can help to, you know, predict the intent of what he's actually looking for. But we are only at the infancy of these steps. We do have some promising results, but we are not nowhere near done there.
Thanks.
You know, to add on to that, like in cases of advertising, where money is being spent at a mass scale, billions of dollars, the measurement is not just on accuracy, it's on sales and return on, you know, the dollar. So if you think of Google search again, if you type a search query, you can see the results. But there's nobody policing Google or Bing search, for example. It's what you see is what you get. The money shifts to areas where it works versus the areas that it doesn't work. And I think that self-policing is going on in terms of accuracy of location, because if it works better, the advertiser is able to see that there's a more return in terms of sales for the retail stores and all that, and they invest heavily in those areas.
Results.
Results matter, right?
And there was a discussion about the lack of awareness of the value of location in the context of business analytics. And one of the questions came in with a comment saying that data and analytics are the new currency for the enterprise, and we are pretty much in agreement there. But what about location data? So I guess the question is with that understanding that there still isn't a large awareness, that we're still on the challenging side of building that case, what are some of the things that we can be doing as a community to raise that level? We have the Location-Based Marketing Association and some other groups out there, but how can we as a community help with that process? Any thoughts on that?
In the last few years is that the technology investments that is happening in the enterprises has shifted from the back office IT operations to much more into marketing business side functions. And as a result, because those folks are beginning to demand the outcome, even though they may not be so much aware of the technology, and their demand for the outcome is driving these activities and the enterprises around that. But in-house capabilities still does not exist. So one of the challenges that, that we kind of encounter all the time is that how do you justify, how do you have a business case presented and then articulated across? So one suggestion that I would coming from a user side is that if the industry is better able to take case examples, have business cases, both for the back office and the front office enterprise, and then maybe come up with better ways to justify that.
So the acoustics are hard, but I think what you said is build use cases and examples to reinforce. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I would extend on that. We've got a number of promotion of best practices, professional associations, innovation challenges, is finding those people that have been really creative and highlighting their successes to the broader community, because then they tend to accelerate and build on each other.
I think everyone that comes here next time around should bring their developers on who's using the data and how.
Yeah.
It almost seems like, this is a good session because we're the users of the data. But I would like to see more use cases. There's like two different conferences. So there's a conference which is apps, and then there's a conference which is the infrastructure. And this is a good first attempt, I think, bringing them together. But, I would love to see more applications.
Yeah, so from our side, we try to make decisions based on data a lot. So we analyze the usage data, how many billion transactions of what type come from what area. And that will often address, if you only take that as the sole criteria, basically mass markets, which we don't want to focus on solely, right? So we need to basically look at the various industries and see where we make an impact. I remember we have always been struggling to identify, what is the value of a spatial capability in a database? How many millions is that worth a year, right? Now, basically, everybody perceives that as a minimum requirement, and we basically can say, we need to find a metric to describe this value. We can say, if somebody comes to us and says, I see PowerMap, this Excel plugin that we had for the storytelling and the data visualization in a geospatial context, and because of this, I wasn't aware of that, because of this, I will deploy the next version of the Microsoft Office product, right? This is value in addition to the pure billions of user data that we can basically scrape from our website. So there's a number of different matrices that we need to apply, and I think everybody needs to define probably what are the data on which he bases his decision. For us, it's the usage scenarios and the amount of usage, word is being used, and so on. So we have fairly well-defined metrics for that.
This is really we have to recognize that, this is a very new area. The information has been available maybe to the government for a long time, but not necessarily to businesses for a long time. So I think the amount of progress that has been made is pretty amazing. And what's really driving it are market pressures. It is basically survival of the fittest. If Bing doesn't take advantage of somebody's location in Texas when they are doing a query on Paris and the results are not as relevant, and Google does better, then Bing will not do as well in the marketplace. Or if media owner does not have the precision required to make the location information about the user valuable, if they don't really have that, they don't tie it to a geofence or a business or a point of interest, etc., then they're going to be at a disadvantage to a disruptor like a company like Exad, where they have figured that out. And I think this is the learning curve is happening really fast, and I think the incentives, the market incentives alone will make sure that this is being adopted really fast.
I hope so. So I just received a question for Dipanshu. What is the fastest land animal? No, that's not the question. But do you know the answer?
I
Don't. Is it cheetah?
It is the cheetah. That's as far as I know, it's the cheetah. Thank you. At 10 points. This person has a question. It relates to privacy and it relates to opt-in and how that affects the analysis. So in the US, there's a heavy investment in privacy, and many users understand that and opt out. Some users don't, and you can track that data. And in other cultures around the world, it's much more inviting. Privacy is less of an issue when you're mobile. But how does that reality of opt-out potentially affect the analytics that are occurring?
Yes, it's a good question, and we get that all the time. So there's two ways to get location information. One is active, the other one is passive. Active is when you open the app. Let's say you check weather. You open the app, the weather app opens, and you see an ad on the screen. That's active, which means the location information is only shared when the app was open and you were actively engaged with it. So that's generally the case with advertising, that is only used in an active scenario, and you've opted into location. Passive scenario is irrespective of if you have the app open or not, is just sending location data in the background. So Google Maps, Facebook, Uber, they do passive. And they're open about it, they're public about it, that when you sign the terms and conditions, when you download the app, they are telling you that they're doing passive. You can actually go on Google Maps and see where you were yesterday or day before. So for us, from an XAD perspective, we're only doing active, and we're doing nothing in the background. But there's a lot of background conversations happening. Ultimately, the view that I have personally, and I think our company does as well, is it's about value exchange. If by providing location information you get something more valuable than you didn't get otherwise, for example, you walk into a car dealership and you want to buy a car, suddenly because let's say you walk into BMW, Mercedes knows you just walked in, gives you a better lease that you would get otherwise, you may save money. Or you walk into a Walmart, you may get coupons and discounts. So is there a location exchange? Is there a value exchange because of location? If the answer is yes, then you will share it, otherwise you won't. In 100% of the cases, you download an app and opt into location. It's never the case that you haven't opted in and something's going on in the background. You don't want to add to that? No?
So there are situations where people do opt out, and I think that's one reason why companies such as Nielsen or others who are in the measurement sciences business, they do representative sampling with the right demography, with the right set of things, so that you take that bias of opt-in and opt-out out of the equation there. And I think those kinds of companies will continue to have an existence in that sense.
Yeah, there's also been and you're right, most people don't know that their location, if they have location turned on in general, that it's pinging in the background. That's how everybody tracks traffic conditions and things of that nature.
Actually, on the iOS, on Apple OS, it's very easy. You go to location, go to settings. By app, you can see which apps are tracking you in the background, which apps are not. And I generally turn off apps that are tracking me in the background if they hadn't told me clearly. So I think you should do the same thing.
So the question is, and I've seen this happen before, we talk about, and I think you, sir, mentioned that it's in the aggregate. It's never about the individual. But if the multitude of data feeds that are available can be applied, there is a way that you can take the aggregate and infer the individual. And this has come up time and time again. And I'm just wondering, in general, what are we trying to do as an industry? What are you trying to do to adhere to those privacy rules when we realize that the integration technique itself can reveal issues about privacy?
Yeah, let me take one quick point on this. Is the Mobile Marketing Association, which has a location privacy unit. I'm on the board of that. And we're working with the government body, to define guidelines around location privacy, storage, expiration of data, residential information versus home information. So there's a lot of work going on in defining the standards. The standards so far say that the data should not be stored for more than 6 months, and residential information should not be tracked, which means that we can only see when you're not in a home location. We can see you in a business location. So those are the guidelines that are being followed by the advertising industry. And as DAA evolves and they come up with new standards, the industry just follows. There's also an ad choices icon on every ad you see, a little triangle on the ad, and you can opt out using that icon of any platform that is looking at your data.
Well, I think the danger, the privacy danger comes when you are able to link an ID to basically all the location data. And I would say there are very few entities that can do that. So Google or Facebook or the government can do that. XAD can't. They just get an ID and they have no idea what it is. And so as a result, plus their business model doesn't really gain anything from knowing the ID. So I think a lot of the media industry in general is actually kind of fairly benign as far as using information and not linking it to IDs. But there are clearly situations where the law can force an extract of the location of somebody, and that is something that the carriers have, a lot of the big providers have, and I'm not sure what can be done about it. It's kind of subject to law.
Fair enough. It's not an easy issue. Did you want to comment, sir?
So I'll give a different example. If we are all familiar with LinkedIn. In the situation of LinkedIn, they actually know the names of the individuals because they're keeping your profiles there. They pretty much know what career path you have had. So in that sense, they will not, you would not be able to hide your personality from somebody like them. But LinkedIn, if you look at them, a couple of months back, they acquired a company called lynda.com. They're leveraging that information. They're leveraging the aggregate information of how people choose their career paths and how they move to impart effective training to individuals. So they've bought a company which is actually into online training. So I think it's probably situational in terms of where the individual information is voluntarily shared and where it's not. I also believe that companies, especially companies such as cable operators, they will have sufficient amount of behavioral information that even though without the name, they would sort of know about what you do, especially if you're operating from home.
Michael, we're dealing a lot with cyber issues right now all around the world, and we've seen the results of some of these cyber attacks both on government and large businesses, and certainly I think this industry is vulnerable to the same type of intrusions. When we talk about enterprise, what could we be doing to share this information more effectively?
Every organization needs to be having basic hygiene. It just kills me to read these reports that come out of the telecom providers every year of the repeat attacks on known vulnerabilities with known solutions. If you let that happen to you or you let that happen to your customers, shame on you. Foundational is just basic hygiene. The thing that we've been working on for a couple years, federal agencies have been trying to get smart about shared situational awareness, sharing threat information. And there was an executive order signed out by the president to try to promote information sharing and analysis organizations. There's already infrastructure information sharing councils, like the financial sector has one that's really pretty mature. And they share with each other with predefined standards what are the threats that they're seeing. And they've said, we do not consider cyber defense a competitive advantage against our competitors because there's collective defense available if we take care of ourselves. And the part that's really a little bit scary right now with the evolution of the industrial Internet of Things, the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything, is the exposure points are increasing faster than the protections. We are attaching now things that were never built to be secure. We have mobile platforms that have known security vulnerabilities, and they are in such demand. The services you've heard about all today are in such high consumer demand that we're introducing vulnerabilities faster than we're plugging the old ones. And at some point, it feels like to me that there's got to be a level of customer demand that says, I demand a secure product from the Microsofts, the Oracles, the Intels, as a consumer demand. Until we get to the point where everybody requires that as an equivalent value to what they want in terms of user features, we're going to keep having products roll out faster than security can be baked in. The best I can say for the community is form up as a community, because I bet there's things that companies in this room know that could help each other if they actually pooled their knowledge.
I mean, for many of you probably know from the Bill Gates note from 2000 that emphasized the importance of security for Microsoft. And since then, the chief security officer can block any product ship. So the concept of Windows as a service is both to make it more appealing constantly to our users and to make them hopefully love our product, but also to make it entirely secure. And if you think about, you know, these hyperscale clouds like Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS clouds, the business is built on trust. If we don't live up to the expectation that we have the best security and the best experts that can defend the security of your data, then we're out of business. So that is essential that we can live up to the expectation.
Please comment on the purchase of Bing Maps Group by Uber and the recent cancellation of the aerial contracts over the US. What will they replace imagery with?
I can answer the first part, not the second. I'm not familiar with that aerial image contract, but I'm happy to have that discussion one-on-one. So the Uber deal is an interesting one. So basically what we sold was parts of our operations in Boulder and in Sunnyvale that were responsible for image acquisition and processing. So actually for the operations of the flying and driving programs that we had to acquire image content. And the decision was made on the executive level that we want to focus on the core competencies for Microsoft, and that data acquisition is not one of these core competencies that we identify or want to build up at this time. So logically, we were looking for a buyer, and Uber was the one who has an interest in these capabilities at this time.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for excellent presentations and the great dialogue. I think we learned this afternoon that location is an underpinning aspect of the analytic process, the measurement process. We still have a long way to go in terms of raising awareness, and we still have some issues that we're working through, but I think, as you aptly said, the more we work through them, the more we'll understand and perfect those processes.